They mocked her for wearing the same costume every year. They laughed at her old firefighter jacket, never knowing the reason behind it. But what happened next would change everything. Sometimes, the smallest moments reveal the biggest truths. And for one little girl named Grace, today was one of those moments. It was class photo day, the one day every kid looked forward to all year. New shoes, fresh haircuts, bright costumes that screamed personality and pride. Everyone wanted to stand out, to be seen. Everyone except Grace. While the others wore princess dresses and superhero suits, Grace stood in something old, something worn, something everyone else thought was strange. Her firefighter jacket, oversized, faded, with a few tiny burn marks near the sleeve. It wasn't shiny or new, but to Grace, it was the most precious thing she owned. You know how kids can be cruel in the way only innocence can justify. They didn't see Grace's pride, only her poverty. One girl whispers, loud enough to be heard, "Look at her jacket. Did she dig that out of a trash can? Maybe she's playing a used firefighter." The class bursts into laughter. Grace lowers her eyes, clutching her sleeve as her cheeks flush red. They laughed, whispered, pointed, and Grace did what she always did. She stayed quiet, because silence was safer than explaining a story no one cared to hear. The teacher, Ms. Winters, steps forward, mid-30s, neat but impatient. She forces a polite smile. Ms. Winters, her teacher, had seen this all before. She could have said something, stopped the teasing, redirected the moment, but instead, she sighed and looked away. To her, Grace's old jacket was a distraction, an eyesore among the polished outfits. She didn't see courage or sentiment, only a student who refused to fit in. All right, everyone line up for class photo. In every class photo, Grace somehow ended up at the edge, the quiet figure, half cut from the frame. Not because she didn't belong, but because no one made room for her. Big smiles, everyone. That photo would end up framed in the school hallway. But behind every smile in that picture was one little girl trying not to cry. To everyone else, this was just another day. But for Grace, it was another reminder that no matter how kind she tried to be, the world only saw what she wore, not who she was. But here's the thing about people like Grace. They carry stories in silence. Stories that could humble the loudest voices if anyone would just listen. While the others compared costumes, Grace traced the embroidered badge sewn onto her jacket. Her father's name, still visible though the thread had faded with time. It was the last piece of him she had left. Most days, she didn't mind being different. She told herself her dad would be proud. But some days, when the laughter got too loud, she wondered what it would feel like to be invisible for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. To Ms. Winters, Grace was a good student. Polite, quiet, average. But in her eyes, being average wasn't enough. She didn't see potential in Grace's silence. She saw apathy. And that's where the world often gets it wrong. We confuse quiet with weak, simplicity with failure, struggle with shame. As the others rushed out to meet their parents in fancy cars and shining shoes, Grace walked toward the faded red sedan waiting by the curb. The door creaked open. And there she was, Tracy, her mother, tired, but smiling like she always did. Tracy didn't have much to give, but she gave everything she had. A mother who worked late, slept a little, and still found a way to make Grace laugh. The kind of strength the world rarely applauds, because it's too quiet to notice. The Halloween festival, Grace said softly. "We need a costume," Tracy read aloud, her voice tired but trying to sound cheerful. Grace just smiled and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I already have one." Tracy knew her daughter deserved more than hand-me-downs, more than stares, more than being known as that girl with the old jacket. But love can make even broken things feel beautiful. They didn't talk much on the way home. They didn't need to. Silence between them wasn't emptiness. It was peace. A rare kind of peace that comes from knowing you're doing your best, even when your best barely feels like enough. Back home, the noise of the world faded away. No laughter, no pointing fingers, just the hum of the fridge, the flicker of a dim light, and the heartbeat of a home built on resilience. That was him, Grace's father, the man behind the jacket, the man whose story had been reduced to a piece of fabric and a handful of whispers. It had been years since he'd passed, years since that fire. But for Tracy, the memory was as fresh as yesterday. The sirens, the smoke, the phone call that broke her world. Yet every morning, she woke up and kept going, because Grace deserved to see what strength looked like. They didn't have much, not new clothes, not expensive furniture. But what they had was something most people never find. Love that doesn't break, even when everything else does. And then, as if the world remembered they were behind on luck, came another reminder reality. Tracy, rent was due last week. You're behind again. Tracy lowers her eyes. I know, I just need a few more days. You've said that before. Amanda snaps. I can't keep waiting forever. The smile fades. The strength wavers. And for a second, she lets herself feel the weight of it all. The exhaustion, the fear, the endless cycle of almost making it. It's okay, Mom, she whispers. We'll be fine. And just like that, the storm inside Tracy's chest softens. Because when a child believes in you, really believes, you start believing again too. That night, while the world outside moved on without noticing them, Grace and her mother sat by a small table, sharing a bowl of soup and laughter over old stories. They talk about her father, how brave he was, how he used to tell the same bad joke about smoke alarms just to make Tracy laugh. And for a moment, it almost felt like he was still there. Do you think he can see us, Mom? She asked. Tracy smiled through tears. I think he never stopped watching. The world outside their little apartment was filled with judgment. People quick to label, quick to laugh. But inside that small home, there was something far stronger than judgment. There was love and the kind of quiet courage that doesn't make headlines but changes lives. That night, as rain tapped against the glass, Grace dreamed of her father again, of fires and bravery and the sound of his voice telling her, "Be strong, sweetheart, even when the world doesn't understand you." And when morning came, she woke up with that same strength, wrapped around her shoulders in the form of an old firefighter jacket. The next day would bring more laughter, more whispers, more judgment. But Grace didn't care. Because when you carry love as your armor, even cruelty can't burn you. The thing about people like Grace is, they remind us of something we forget too easily. That value isn't about what you wear, but what you carry inside. And sometimes, the greatest strength lies in the ones who never raise their voices. The ones who simply keep showing up day after day, even when the world gives them every reason not to. Different isn't always wrong. Sometimes, it's the beginning of something extraordinary. While the world outside moved at its usual pace inside a small, dimly lit apartment, time seemed to move slower. The walls were covered in memories, hand-drawn pictures, a cracked photo frame, and a single firefighter helmet resting on a shelf like a silent guardian. Grace's mother, Tracy, was already awake long before the sun came up. Her mornings didn't start with coffee and calm music. They started with worry, with the sound of overdue bills rustling under her fingertips and the thought, how much longer could we keep this up? She tried to smile through it, but her eyes, they told a different story. Every wrinkle, every sigh, was proof of a battle she'd been fighting for years. One that nobody saw. One that didn't come with medals or applause. Grace, just 10 years old, tiptoed into the kitchen, wearing that same oversized firefighter jacket, sleeves almost swallowing her hands. She didn't see the struggle. She saw her hero, not the kind who fought fires, but the kind who fought for her every single day. "Morning, Mom," she said with that innocent smile that made everything feel okay for a moment. And for that moment, Tracy forgot about the unpaid rent, the stack of final notices, the second job interview she might not make it to. For that moment, it was just them. Tracy always said that love can't pay bills, but it sure makes the struggle easier to bear. The kitchen wasn't fancy. Chipped counters, flickering light, and a fridge that groaned louder than the city buses outside. But somehow, it always smelled like home. Peanut butter sandwiches, warm milk, and just a dash of hope. She double-checked the lunchbox, even though she already knew what was inside. It wasn't about the food. It was about love. about sending a piece of her heart with Grace to school every single day. But behind that quiet moment was pressure building like a ticking clock. Rent was late, again, and the landlord, Amanda, wasn't known for her patience. The knock came like thunder, not too loud, but heavy enough to send a shiver through the air. Tracy froze. She didn't need to open the door to know who it was. "Morning, Amanda," she said, forcing a polite smile. But Amanda didn't smile back. She didn't see a mother doing her best. She saw another tenant with excuses. "Tracy, I've been patient," Amanda said, "but you're 2 weeks late again. I can't keep waiting." Her words were sharp, but not cruel, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from running a business, not from running out of options. Tracy tried to explain. She always did. How her shift was cut short. How she picked up extra hours at the diner. How she just needed until Friday. But when someone's drowning in numbers, they forget to see the person underneath them. "Friday, Tracy. No later." That's all she said before walking off. And when the door closed, so did Tracy's last bit of calm. Grace had been watching from the hallway. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the silence that followed. Kids always do. They can feel tension, even when no one speaks it. She walked over, gently holding her mother's hand. "Mom, it's okay. Dad used to say heroes always find a way, right?" Tracy smiled through her tears. She wanted to believe it. She really did. But some days, even heroes need saving. Minutes later, she was out the door again, off to her first job, a small diner near the station. Her second shift would start right after at a cleaning company downtown. No breaks, no time for herself, just survival. She didn't complain, because mothers like her, they don't. They carry the world quietly, and when the world becomes too heavy, they still manage to smile, so their kids don't have to feel the weight. Grace spent the rest of the morning waiting for school. She looked at her father's picture, a firefighter in full gear, smile wide, eyes bright, the kind of smile that could light up a whole room. She whispered, "I miss you, Dad." Then she put on the old jacket again. It hung heavy on her shoulders, but somehow it made her stand taller. That jacket wasn't just fabric and buttons. It was her father's story stitched into every seam. It was courage, love, and loss, all wrapped around her like a second skin. Every year, when Halloween came around, she refused to wear anything else. Kids called it weird. Teachers called it inappropriate. But Grace called it home. She didn't have the latest costumes. No princess dresses. No glitter. But what she did have was meaning. And that meant more than anything bought with money. Meanwhile, at the diner, Tracy was trying to hold it together. The morning rush was brutal. Coffee spilling, orders overlapping, her manager's voice cutting through the noise. "Tracy, you're late again." Mr. Hall barked. She wanted to explain, the bus, the landlord, Grace's breakfast, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Some people see lateness. Others see life happening. And that's the thing about struggle. People rarely notice until it's their turn to feel it. She worked faster, her hands trembling as she poured coffee, cleared tables, smiled at customers who didn't even look up. To them, she was just a waitress. But to Grace, she was everything. Back home, the apartment was quiet again. The ticking clock echoed louder than usual. Grace drew pictures on a scrap of paper. Her dad as a firefighter, her mom as a superhero beside him. She didn't draw sadness. She drew hope. Because sometimes when life gives you darkness, the only thing you can do is draw the light yourself. When her shift ended, Tracy checked her wallet. $10 short rent and 3 hours late for her next job. She took a deep breath, whispered, "Just a little longer," and ran for the door. She missed it again. And in that moment, standing in the rain, everything caught up to her. The exhaustion, the fear, the weight of holding a life together with nothing but hope and duct tape. But then, like a small miracle, her phone buzzed. A message from Grace. "Love you, Mom. Don't forget, heroes never give up." She stared at the message, tears mixing with raindrops, and smiled. Because sometimes it's not the world that gives you strength, it's the tiny hands waiting for you at home. When she walked through the door, Grace was already waiting. Dinner table set, lights dim, and a small candle flickering beside a plate of reheated leftovers. "Look, Mom," Grace said proudly. "You're a hero, too." Tracy laughed, her exhaustion breaking for the first time all day. "Sweetheart, I'm no hero." "You are to me," Grace whispered, and that simple sentence hit harder than any paycheck ever could. That night, they sat together on the couch, wrapped in the old firefighter jacket, like a blanket. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was filled with love, and that was enough. Life wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. But it was theirs, built not on comfort, but on courage. That helmet on the shelf wasn't just decoration. It was a promise that no matter how hard things got, they would keep going, because real heroes never stop fighting, even when no one's watching. As the night grew darker, Tracy tucked Grace into bed. She kissed her forehead and whispered, "Sleep tight, baby. Daddy's watching over you." And as she turned off the light, Tracy took one last look at the jacket hanging by the window. The moonlight hit it just right, making it glow faintly, like a silent reminder from the man they both missed. She sat at the table again, picking up the bills she couldn't pay, staring at the numbers that didn't add up. But this time she didn't cry, because Grace's words were still echoing in her heart. Heroes always find a way. And maybe, just maybe, she would too. People often measure success by what they have. Cars, houses, money in the bank. But Tracy measured it differently. For her, success was keeping her child's smile alive. And that was worth more than anything else. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning, because soon the world would see that being the firefighter's daughter wasn't something to laugh at. It was something to honor. By the time Tracy reached the diner, the morning rush had already begun. The smell of burnt toast and coffee filled the air, plates clattered, and voices overlapped. For most people, it was just another Tuesday. But for Tracy, it was another chance to prove she could still hold everything together. She had been late again, not by much, just a few minutes. But to her boss, Mr. Hall, those few minutes felt like hours. And he was waiting. He didn't see the woman who ran through rain, missed the bus, and worked 2 shifts to feed her child. He saw an employee with excuses. And that's the painful truth about people like Tracy. The world rarely notices the storms they survive before they walk through the door. "You're late again," he said, his tone sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Do you even care about this job?" Tracy didn't argue. She just apologized, because arguing doesn't pay rent. Apologies at least buy time. Some people wear confidence like armor. Tracy wore exhaustion. It showed in her posture, in her quietness, in the way she forced a smile when she wanted to cry. She remembered her husband's words. "When things get hard, keep moving. Firefighters don't stop when it burns." She repeated that line in her mind every day. It wasn't just motivation, it was survival. She kept moving. Table 3 needed refills. Table 6 wanted their check split 3 ways. The kitchen bell rang again and again. But no matter how hard she worked, she could feel Mr. Hall's eyes following her, like a shadow waiting for a mistake. And when you work under pressure, mistakes eventually find you. A spilled drink, a missed order. It doesn't matter that you're doing your best. All anyone sees is the moment you fall short. He didn't yell this time. He just sighed. And sometimes that's worse, because disappointment echoes louder than anger. Hours passed. Her feet ached, her back burned, and her mind raced. Every table was a reminder. If she lost this job, she'd lose more than money. She'd lose stability. She'd lose hope. Her daughter's picture was her compass. Every tired breath, every forced smile was for that little girl waiting at home. Still, she couldn't escape reality. Rent was due Friday. Grace needed new shoes. The electricity bill had another red stamp on it. And there she was, working herself to the bone for tips that barely covered bus fare. She didn't complain. She never did. Because when you've lost as much as she had, gratitude becomes your only weapon against despair. During a short break, if you could even call it that. Tracy sat by the window, sipping water from a paper cup. Outside, people laughed, scrolled their phones, lived their easy lives. And for a moment, she wondered, did anyone even see people like her? Because invisibility hurts more than poverty. When the world stops noticing you, it feels like you've already disappeared. She took a deep breath, stood up again, and went back to work. Because life doesn't pause for exhaustion. Bills don't care about tears. And courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up one more time. Meanwhile, behind those glass doors, Mr. Hall was reviewing paperwork. To him, Tracy was just another name on a schedule, another employee always a step behind. But little did he know, her story was tied to his in ways he'd never imagined. Life has a strange way of connecting people. Sometimes the person you judge today is the one whose past saved your future. The lunch rush was over. The chatter died down. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure. She still had 3 hours left, and each one felt longer than the last. She leaned against the counter for just a moment, rubbing her wrists, before grabbing a rag and wiping again. There was no rest in her world. Only rhythm. Work, breathe, repeat. And even through it all, she still greeted every customer with kindness. Because deep down, she believed that being good, even when life isn't, is its own kind of heroism. But goodness doesn't always shield you from trouble. Just as she thought she was getting through the day, fate decided to test her again. She didn't notice the mix-up. One wrong order. A tiny mistake in a sea of effort. But to the customer at table 7, it was the end of the world. Mr. Hall stormed out, face tight with frustration. Tracy, what happened this time? The words hit like fire. Everyone looked. No one spoke. She wanted to explain that she'd double-checked, that she'd barely slept, that she was trying. But in moments like that, explanations sound like excuses. And people stop listening before you even start talking. She fixed the order, apologized, and kept going. Because when life knocks you down, pride isn't what gets you back up, purpose is. By the end of the shift, her hands were raw from soap, her knees sore, her throat dry. But still, she whispered to herself, 1 more hour, just 1 more. When the diner finally emptied, she gathered her things, a small purse, an old coat, a few coins in her palm. And as she clocked out, she caught her reflection in the window. For a second, she didn't recognize herself. The woman staring back wasn't the same one she used to be, full of dreams, laughter, and color. But behind the tired eyes, the fire still burned, dim but alive, because she had a reason to keep going, Grace. The cold wind hit her face, but it felt good. It reminded her she was still here, still fighting. And sometimes surviving another day is its own kind of victory. She stopped at a small bakery across the street, staring through the glass at cupcakes and cookies she couldn't afford. She wasn't hungry, but she thought of Grace, the way her eyes lit up whenever she saw sprinkles. She spent her last $2 on a single cupcake, because even in the hardest times, love finds small ways to stay alive. The ride home was long. The bus hummed quietly as tired strangers leaned against windows. Each face told its own story. Different struggles, same exhaustion. She wondered if any of them were fighting for someone too. Because when you live for someone you love, even the longest days have meaning. When she finally reached home, the sky had already turned deep blue. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, like candles against the dark. She climbed the old stairs, each step echoing through the silence. Grace was already waiting by the window, holding a drawing, her mom, her dad, and her, standing in front of a fire truck. She ran into her mother's arms before a word could be spoken. And that's when all the noise, all the pressure, all the exhaustion melted away. Because in that one hug, she found peace. Tracy didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe another late shift. Maybe another fight to keep her job. But tonight, she had Grace and a reason to keep showing up. They shared the cupcake like it was a feast. 1 bite each, laughter echoing through the small apartment. For anyone else, it would seem like nothing. But for them, it was everything. As they laughed, the old firefighter jacket swayed slightly from the draft, a quiet reminder that their hero might be gone, but his spirit hadn't left. It lived through every struggle they faced, every moment they refused to give up. It's easy to judge people like Tracy, the ones who show up late, who seem distracted, who never look rested. But behind every tired smile is a story you haven't heard yet, a reason you haven't seen. Because sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who shout about it. They're the ones who wake up every day and fight invisible battles in silence. Tracy wasn't perfect. She wasn't wealthy, but she was brave. And though the world didn't see it yet, she was about to prove that even ordinary people can live extraordinary lives. Some mornings feel heavier than others. And for Tracy, this one felt like the weight of the entire world was sitting on her chest. Rent was overdue. The bills were piling up. Her car payment was late. And no matter how hard she ran, life always seemed to run faster. She prayed it would start just one more time, just enough to get to work. But sometimes, when you're already at your breaking point, life has a way of testing how much further you can bend before you break. Little victories felt like miracles. Every time that car turned on, it wasn't just an engine running. It was hope surviving for one more day. Every second mattered, because Mr. Hall, her boss, wasn't known for patience. He was known for rules. And for people like Tracy, rules were unforgiving. Late. Again. Not because she didn't care, but because sometimes, no matter how early you start, life just pulls you 10 steps back. She didn't see it yet, but the day had more in store than she could imagine. He saw her the way the world sees most struggling people, as the problem, never the reason. "Tracy," he says sharply, "do you even care about this job anymore?" But to him, excuses sounded like noise. He didn't hear her story, he heard failure. "You were supposed to finish those reports last night." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just said, "I'll stay late today. I'll make it up." Because that's what people like her do. They keep trying, even when no one notices. She knows that tone before even answering. The one that says, "You're running out of time." She nods, trying to sound calm. But inside, panic builds. She's 2 months behind. And this time, there's no grace period. You ever had those moments where silence feels louder than sound? When everything around you keeps moving, but your world just stops. That was Tracy, sitting on those cold concrete steps, wondering how much longer she could keep pretending she was okay. Tracy walks to her car. It's gone. Then she sees it, the empty space, the tow truck driving off. Her heart drops. The only thing keeping her world together was gone. She runs toward the street, waving at the tow truck, but it's too far. Her voice cracks, her knees shake, and the city just keeps moving. "You can call this number," he says, like it's nothing. But to Trace, it was everything. It's strange, isn't it? How the world can be so full of people, and yet feel completely empty when you need someone the most. She sees families eating dinner, kids in pajamas, smiles that remind her of everything she's fighting for. And for a moment, she feels both hope and heartbreak. She wasn't angry at life, just tired of fighting so hard to stand still. She picks up, forcing a smile into her voice. "Hi, baby." Grace asks, "Mom, are you coming home soon?" And just like that, the weight disappears for a second. She tells her, "Of course, honey. Mommy's just walking home tonight." She doesn't mention the car. She doesn't mention the rent. Because some truths are too heavy for little shoulders. She stares at numbers that don't make sense anymore. Every dollar already spent, every option already gone. She runs to her mom, showing a picture of a firefighter with a big heart drawn on his chest. "It's Daddy," she says softly. "I drew him saving people again." Tracy forces a smile, holding back tears. She whispers, "He'd be so proud of you, baby." But deep down, she's wondering if she's doing enough to make him proud. Grace hugs her, wrapping tiny arms around her neck. You see, sometimes children don't need to understand our pain. Their love just makes it lighter. The next morning, Tracy at work again, still tired but determined. He doesn't yell this time, just looks disappointed. And sometimes that hurts more than anger. He tells her, "Tracy, I can't keep doing this. You're a good worker, but business is business." She nods, lips pressed tight, because arguing never works when people have already made up their minds. He slides a paper across the table. Termination notice. Just like that, another door closed, another piece of stability gone. And she walked out of that office like a ghost, unseen, unheard. Outside, she leans against the wall, eyes closed. For a moment, everything blurs, sound, color, even breath. Sometimes, it's not the big things that break you. It's the little ones that never stop coming. Tracy unlocks the door, steps inside slowly. Grace runs to greet her, excited. Grace doesn't know what happened. She's holding a paper from school, Halloween festival next week. Inside, her heart is breaking. Because while other kids plan costumes, she's planning how to keep a roof over their heads. Grace asks, "Can we go, Mom?" And Tracy just nods. Because sometimes saying yes is all you can give. Tracy steps into the kitchen. Another envelope sits on the counter, bold red letters. Final notice, eviction pending. She opens it slowly. The words blur through her tears. She doesn't cry loudly, just stand there in silence, gripping the paper, her knuckles white. Grace knew something was wrong. Kids always know, even when we try to hide it. Grace walks back to her room and starts folding her clothes. Carefully, like she's seen her mom do before. She didn't ask questions. She just wanted to help. Because love doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just acts. It wasn't just a home. It was the last place where she still felt her husband's presence. The walls still held memories of laughter, lullabies, and little victories. She touches a framed photo, her husband in uniform, smiling with Grace as a baby. She whispers, "I'm trying, I promise." The kind of whisper meant for heaven, not for anyone else. Grace appears at the door, holding her small backpack. "It's okay, Mom," she says. "We can go somewhere new. Daddy will still find us, right?" You see, when life tries to crush you, sometimes your reason to fight back is standing right in front of you. That night, as they stepped out into the rain, Tracy didn't just lose her home. She lost the last piece of normal she had left. But what she didn't know was that this was the beginning of something greater. Car headlights in the dark. Tracy's car is gone. They carry bags down the street, Grace holding her mom's hand tightly. When everything seems to fall apart, sometimes, that's just life clearing the way for something better. You just can't see it yet. Sometimes heroes are born in silence, in the moments no one else sees. Tracy didn't realize it yet, but every heartbreak, every loss, every sleepless night was shaping her daughter into something incredible. And soon, the world would find out. Sometimes the hardest nights aren't the ones filled with noise, but the ones where silence speaks louder than anything else. Inside the car, Tracy in the driver's seat, Grace curled up beside her under a worn blanket. After losing their home, Tracy told herself this would be temporary. Just one night to think, to breathe, to figure out what comes next. She didn't tell Grace they had nowhere else to go. She just said, "Let's camp in the car tonight, okay?" And forced a smile. Because when you're a parent, even despair needs disguises. Grace giggled as she drew, pretending it was all an adventure. In her eyes, this wasn't homelessness. It was hope on four wheels. Tracy watches her daughter with a faint smile. She wished she could borrow that innocence again, the kind that finds magic in misery. The hours stretched slowly. Every car that passed felt like a reminder that the world kept moving, even when theirs had stopped. Tracy adjusts the seat, trying to rest, but her mind refuses to quiet. She kept replaying every moment. The rent, the job, the tow truck, the look on her boss's face. All the small cracks that finally broke the surface. You ever have nights like that? When you stare at the ceiling or the car roof and wonder if you've already failed the people you love most. Tracy looks at Grace sleeping, brushes a strand of hair from her face. She whispers, "I'm sorry, baby." Not because Grace asked her to, but because mothers apologize for storms they never created. She didn't know that even in this moment of defeat, Grace was already learning strength just by watching her. It's 00 a.m. The rain has stopped. The world is still. She checks it anyway. No missed calls. No messages. Just a quiet reminder that sometimes, when you fall, no one sees it happen. A police car rolls slowly past. The beam of light sweeps through the window. For a second, fear grips her chest. Would they be told to move? Would someone report them? The patrol car keeps driving. She exhales, relieved but shaken. Even safety had become something borrowed. "Mom," she mumbles, "I'm cold." Tracy removes her jacket and wraps it around Grace's shoulders. She says softly, "Better?" Grace nods, already drifting back to sleep. Tracy sits there in silence, arms crossed, watching her breathe. She wonders how something so small could carry so much light. Grace didn't know it yet, but she was the anchor keeping her mother from drifting away. Inside the glove compartment, Tracy opens it. Inside, a folded photograph of her husband in his firefighter uniform. She takes it out, runs her thumb across his smile. "You'd know what to do," she whispers. Every decision, every sacrifice felt heavy without him. She missed the sound of certainty, the way he used to say, "We'll figure it out, Trace." She closes her eyes, holding the picture to her chest. In that dark car, surrounded by uncertainty, she made herself a promise. This will not be the end of our story. Early morning light. The sky turns pale blue. Birds begin to stir. Grace wakes up, rubbing her eyes. She smiles, "Morning, Mom." As if the back seat of a car was a 5-star hotel. Tracy forces a smile back. She answers, "Morning, sunshine," and somehow saying out loud makes it feel real, even if just for a heartbeat. They open a pack of crackers, breakfast. Grace breaks one in half and offers it to her mother. "You take the bigger piece," she insists. Tracy laughs gently, pretending to protest. Little moments like that, kindness in its purest form, kept her heart from shattering completely. They hold hands. Tracy's clothes are wrinkled, her hair loosely tied. She walks a step behind her daughter, hiding exhaustion behind a brave face. She promised Grace that no matter what, she'd still go to school, because education was the one thing life couldn't repossess. Outside the school gates, other parents arrive in cars, fresh coffee in hand. Tracy lingers near the curb. She tells Grace, "I'll pick you up right here after class, okay?" Grace nods, hugging her tight. Tracy watches her walk inside, pretending not to notice the sideways glances from other parents. Judgment is easy when you've never had to sleep in your car. She turns away before anyone can see the tears welling up. Tracy's sitting in the car again, engine off, notebook open. She writes lists, potential jobs, shelters, contacts. She wasn't waiting for help. She was rebuilding quietly, piece by piece. She writes, 1. Call Mr. Hall again. 2. Apply at diner. 3. Check fire department memorial fund. Even when hope was small, she refused to let it vanish completely. See, strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a tired woman writing plans in a parked car, while the world drives past her without noticing. A passerby knocks on her window, an older woman holding a bag of sandwiches. The woman smiles. "You two looked hungry last night. Thought you could use these." Tracy hesitates, then thanks her quietly. She didn't know her name, but for the first time in days, kindness found them. Grace once said heroes save people. Maybe she was right, because that stranger saved something too, their faith in humanity. Evening, Grace returns from school, smiling. She jumps into her mom's arms. "Mom, guess what? Ms. Winters said we're having a Halloween festival." Tracy laughs, a sound that's been missing for days. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." But then Grace's excitement softens. "Do we still have my firefighter jacket?" She asks. "Of course we do." "Why?" Grace smiles shyly. "Because I want to wear it again." Tracy looks surprised. "You sure?" "The other kids." Grace interrupts. "I don't care. It's Dad's jacket. That simple answer hit harder than 1,000 lessons. Grace didn't see shame in the jacket, only pride. That night, as they curled up again beneath the same roof of stars, Tracy realized something. They may have lost their house, but not their home. Tracy whispers to Grace, "You proud of Dad?" Grace answers softly, "Always, and of you too." Tracy looks away, swallowing tears. The car hums quietly in the distance of passing traffic. She whispers back, "You're the reason I keep going." Grace yawns, nestling closer. "Then let's keep going together." Days blurred into nights. Nights blurred into mornings. But through every hour, one thing stayed constant, their unshaken bond. Tracy tucks Grace in with a blanket. Grace prays softly, "Thank you for today. Thank you for Mom. And please help us find a home." Tracy listens quietly, eyes closed, letting her daughter's faith become her strength. Thunder growls across the sky. Tracy holds Grace close. "It's just rain, honey," she murmurs. The storm outside echoed the one inside. Fear, exhaustion, and the question she dared not ask. How much longer? Suddenly, a loud bang. A tree branch crashes near the car. Tracy gasps but stays calm. She turns a key. The engine coughs, then dies. In that moment, it felt like the world had run out of mercy. Grace squeezes her hand. "Mom, Dad would have been scared too, right?" "No, sweetheart. He would have been brave. Just like you." "Then I'll be brave too." And just like that, the storm lost its power. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's love refusing to let fear win. The rain eventually stopped. But something changed that night. The way Tracy looked at herself. Not as a failure, but as a fighter. It's morning again. Tracy steps out, stretching, breathing in the crisp air. For the first time in weeks, she feels something she thought she'd lost, possibility. She opens a trunk, rummages through boxes, finds Grace's school project, a drawing of a firefighter rescuing a family. She smiles at the caption in shaky letters. "My dad is my hero. My mom is too." She whispers, "Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's where we start again." A notice board reads, "Hiring, cleaning staff. Immediate start." She applies on the spot. The manager, noticing her tired eyes but kind smile, gives her a chance. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with trumpets. Sometimes they look like a simple yes. Later that evening, she picks Grace up from school, holding a small brown paper bag. Grace looks curious. "What's that?" Tracy grins. "Dinner. Real dinner." They eat together in the car. Warm food, shared laughter, small joy. In that parking lot, under fading daylight, they didn't feel broken anymore. They felt alive. You know, we spend so much time chasing big wins that we forget survival itself is a victory. Every sunrise they saw from that car meant another chance to rebuild. Each day got a little brighter. Each step a little surer. And slowly, the space that once felt like a cage became the birthplace of their comeback. 1 week later, Tracy gets her first paycheck. She holds it carefully, almost afraid to believe it's real. She cashes it, buys groceries, and a small secondhand lunchbox for Grace shaped like a fire truck. "Mom, it's just like Dad's truck." She didn't have to say anything. The look between them said it all. We're getting there. That night, the car now tidy, blankets folded, dashboard clean. Tracy and Grace sit quietly, sharing stories. Grace asks, "Mom, do you think Dad can see us?" Tracy nods. Every day, he's the reason the car still runs. They both laugh softly. It wasn't true, not mechanically, but emotionally, it was everything. That little car, once a symbol of loss, had become their sanctuary, their classroom of courage. Inside those metal walls, Grace learned compassion, and Tracy rediscovered faith. They didn't have much, but they had what mattered most, love that refused to quit. And when Grace whispered, "Dad would be proud of you," Tracy finally believed it. Hope doesn't live in houses. It lives in hearts that refuse to give up. They were still in the car, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't lost. They were on their way. Morning light always finds a way in, even through cracked glass. It's funny how the smallest bit of sunshine can make a cold car feel like a home, even if just for a moment. Inside that car, Grace stirred awake. Her small fingers rubbed her eyes, and beside her, Tracy, the woman who'd spent the night pretending to sleep, so her daughter wouldn't see her cry, took a deep breath. She didn't have to say it, but the silence between them spoke louder than words. They were okay for now. The air smelled faintly of yesterday's rain. The world outside was rushing again. People with coffees, cars honking, life moving on as if nothing had changed. But for Tracy and Grace, everything had changed. Grace reached for her school bag, its zipper hanging loosely, the corners frayed from years of use. She glanced at her reflection in the window, a sleepy smile fighting its way through exhaustion. "Don't worry, Mom," she said softly. "It's just another day." And somehow those words, "just another day," became their promise. You ever notice how kids have this strange kind of strength? The kind that doesn't roar, doesn't demand to be seen. It just shows up quietly when life gets heavy. That was Grace. While Tracy worried about bills and jobs and what to do next, Grace's mind was somewhere else entirely. On her school, her classmates, and that old firefighter jacket folded neatly on her lap. She smoothed the fabric out with care, brushing off invisible dust. The sleeves were long, the color faded, but to her, it was still perfect. It was her father's, the man she'd never met, but felt connected to every single day she pulled that jacket over her shoulders. Tracy turned to her, voice barely holding together. "You sure you want to wear that again today, honey?" Grace nodded, eyes steady. "Yeah, Mom. It's my favorite." There was something about the way she said it, soft yet certain, that made Tracy's chest tighten. She smiled back, even though it hurt, because deep down she knew that jacket wasn't just Grace's favorite. It was her shield. The school looked the same as always. Big brick walls, bright posters, and that smell of polished floors mixed with cafeteria food. For most kids, it was just another morning. For Grace, it felt like walking into a storm she already knew too well. She stepped through the gate, clutching the straps of her backpack, the firefighter jacket hanging a little too big on her small frame. Her sneakers squeaked faintly as she walked the hall, trying to disappear into the noise. But you know how it is. When you're different, the world always notices. A whisper from the lockers, a giggle by the water fountain, a sarcastic, "Oh, look, here comes Fire Girl again." Grace didn't look up. She'd heard it all before. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. It's the sound of someone choosing peace over pride. It's strange, isn't it? The way kids can turn cruelty into entertainment. They didn't know where she slept last night. They didn't know about the cold metal of the car door or the ache in her mother's shoulders from sleeping upright. They only saw what they could see, a girl with an old jacket and a quiet smile. And when people don't understand something, they fill the silence with judgment. Grace reached her locker, slowly turning the dial. It creaked open with that familiar groan. Inside, a photo of her and her mom smiled back, taped crookedly, edges curling from age. She touched it gently, then closed the door. "Today's gonna be a good day," she whispered to herself. "Has to be." The classroom buzzed with excitement. Tomorrow was the big Halloween festival, and everyone was talking about their costumes. Robots, princesses, superheroes. Each kid trying to outshine the next. Grace took her seat quietly at the back, placing her bag beside her desk. She tried to blend in, to become invisible, but invisibility has a cruel way of breaking when you least want it to. Jules, the girl whose laughter always cut the room in half, turned around, flashing her shiny bracelets. "So, Grace, let me guess, you're wearing that again tomorrow." The room stilled. Grace hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yeah, it's my favorite." Laughter rippled through the room like a wave. Ms. Winters looked up from her papers, sighing deeply. "All right, settle down, everyone." But the tone wasn't protective. It was tired, dismissive, the kind that says, "I don't want to deal with this right now." Grace lowered her gaze, cheeks burning, but she didn't cry. She'd learned that tears only make people laugh harder. You ever meet someone who carries their pain so gracefully that you almost forget it's there? That was her gift. Grace didn't fight back, didn't snap, didn't run. She simply stood. But inside, she was tired. She wanted just once for someone to see her jacket and say, "That's cool," instead of "That's old." She wanted to feel like she belonged in a world that seemed built for everyone else but her. And yet, despite all that, she smiled. Because sometimes hope is the only thing you can afford to keep. Lunch was the hardest part of every day. It wasn't the food, it was the silence. The kind of silence that makes every laugh across the room feel aimed right at you. Grace opened her lunchbox, the same peanut butter sandwich her mom always packed, even when money was tight. She smiled faintly, remembering how Tracy would always cut it into a heart shape. That was love in its simplest form, quiet, unseen, but always there. Then came Jules again, strutting past with her friends. "Still eating alone, fire girl? Don't you ever get tired of pretending that jacket makes you special?" Grace didn't answer. She just looked down, pressing her hand against the fabric. You know, sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. Because when you don't feed cruelty, it starves. Art class, her safe place. Here, she could speak without words. Her brush moved softly across the paper, strokes of red and gold blending into the shape of a fireman's helmet. She painted carefully, layer by layer, as if rebuilding a memory she never got to live. Ms. Winters walked by, glancing down. "That's nice, Grace, but maybe try painting something a bit happier next time." Grace smiled politely. "Okay, Ms. Winters." The teacher moved on, missing entirely what was right in front of her, a masterpiece painted not with skill, but with love. You ever notice how people rush past beauty because it doesn't sparkle loud enough? Sometimes the most meaningful things whisper instead of shout. That painting would mean more than Ms. Winters could ever guess. But for now, it was just another picture on another classroom wall. By the final bell, Grace's energy was fading. The jacket felt heavier, not from weight, but from the stares it carried. As the class packed up, Ms. Winters cleared her throat. "Before you all go," she said, "remember, tomorrow's our Halloween festival. Let's make it fun and creative." And Grace. The room quieted again. Grace looked up. Ms. Winters hesitated, then spoke softly. "Maybe it's time for a new costume, dear." It wasn't said cruelly. Maybe she even meant well, but it still landed like a stone. Grace nodded politely. "Okay." The room was silent for a moment. Then the noise returned, bags zipping, laughter rising, feet shuffling toward the door. Words don't always have to be sharp to cut deep. Sometimes the softest ones do the most damage. Grace walked out of class, her steps slow, her mind racing. She didn't blame Ms. Winters. She didn't even blame the kids. But something inside her ached, a small voice asking, "Why can't they see what it means to me?" Outside, the afternoon sky glowed orange. The playground was empty, swaying gently in the wind. Grace sat on one of them, holding the edge of her jacket tight. There, under the golden light, she closed her eyes and remembered the stories her mom used to tell. Stories of a man who ran toward danger while everyone else ran away. A man who never came back, but whose courage lived on through every heartbeat she had. And in that quiet moment, Grace made herself a promise that tomorrow she wouldn't hide her father's memory, that she would wear the jacket again, no matter what they said. When Tracy saw her daughter walking toward her, she noticed a faint slump in her shoulders, the weight in her eyes. "Rough day?" she asked gently. Grace forced a grin. "Nah, just tired." Tracy nodded, pretending to believe her. That's what love does sometimes. It lets the lies sit there, because the truth hurts too much to say out loud. As they drove off, the city lights flickered to life. Grace leaned her head against the window, watching them blur past like tiny fires. She thought about the festival tomorrow, about the laughter, the eyes, the whispers. And still, she smiled, because when you carry the heart of a hero, fear has no place to stay. You know, everyone else has a jacket. Maybe not made of cloth or memory, but of something we hold close, something that reminds us who we are when the world forgets. For Grace, it was her father's old uniform. For you, maybe it's a song, a photo, or just a promise you made to yourself a long time ago. Whatever it is, never be ashamed to wear it. Back in the car, as the world outside drifted asleep, Grace ran her fingers along the fabric one last time. She whispered to it like it could hear her, "Tomorrow, Dad, I'll make you proud." The streetlight above flickered once, bathing the car in a warm glow. Tracy glanced over and smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "You already do, sweetheart." And that's the thing about real strength. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need a crowd. Sometimes it looks like a little girl in a worn-out jacket, walking into a world that doesn't understand her, yet still daring to be kind. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, Grace simply dreamed. Dreamed of firelight, of courage, of the father she never met, and the woman she was already becoming. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't running into flames. It's walking through judgment with your head held high. The school gym looked like a different world that morning. Orange lights hanging from basketball hoops, tables stacked with cupcakes, and kids showing off their glittering costumes. To everyone else, it was a day for fun. But for Grace, it was the day she dreaded most. She stood by the door, clutching the same firefighter jacket she'd worn since kindergarten. The fabric had grown thinner, the sleeves shorter. Still, she smoothed it carefully, the way her mom once taught her, and whispered, "Dad, help me get through this." Across the room, Jules and her friends twirled in matching princess gowns. Their laughter cut through the music like tiny knives. Grace forced a smile. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry today. Not again. The teacher, Ms. Winters, tapped the mic. "All right, class. Time for our costume presentations. Remember, confidence counts." Her cheerful voice bounced off the gym walls, but Grace's stomach tightened. She wished confidence came as easily as Jules's laughter. One by one, students stepped forward. A boy in a superhero cape flexed dramatically. Laughter. Applause. A pair of twins dressed as astronauts posed for photos. Every costume looked new, expensive, shimmering beneath the lights. When the last name before hers was called, Grace's heartbeat turned into thunder. Next, Grace Miller. The room hushed. A ripple of curiosity. A few whispers. Same jacket again. Grace stepped forward, slow, steady, one small step against a mountain of fear. The jacket hung loosely on her shoulders, patches of soot still faint on the collar. Her fingers trembled, but she lifted her chin. There's a moment, right before truth meets the world, when your heart decides, hide or be seen. Grace was done hiding. She faced the crowd. The microphone wobbled in her small hands. For a second, all she heard was the buzz of speakers and the pounding in her ears. Then she spoke. "I know my costume doesn't sparkle," she said quietly, "and it's not new, but this jacket belonged to my dad." The chatter faded. Ms. Winters lowered her clipboard. Grace's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. He was a firefighter. When there was a big fire at a school, he ran inside to help the kids get out. A flashback rolled to the screen. Sirens, smoke, chaos. A man in full gear charging through flames. That man was her father. He carried out children one by one, choking on smoke but never slowing down. He saved every life that day, except his own. Back in the gym, silence swallowed the room. Grace swallowed hard. "I never got to meet him," she said, "but Mom told me he never hesitated. So when I wear this, I feel like he's still here, like he's telling me, don't give up, even when people laugh." A few kids lowered their heads. Jules looked down at her sparkling shoes. And there it was, the sound of realization. Not loud, just quiet breaths and shifting feet. The moment when judgment turns into guilt, and guilt into understanding. Grace smiled faintly, tears glimmering on her cheeks. She glanced at Ms. Winters, who stood frozen, eyes wide with recognition. Because suddenly, Ms. Winters remembered. Years ago, during that same fire, she'd been a substitute teacher at the school next door. She remembered the heat, the smoke, the fear, and the man who carried her student to safety before collapsing. That man was Grace's father. Ms. Winters stepped closer, voice trembling. "Grace, your father saved my student that day." Gasps echoed through the crowd. The gym doors opened. Parents began to enter for the festival showcase, including Tracy, Grace's mom, nervous but proud. And behind her, Mr. Hall, the factory manager who had fired her just weeks earlier. He looked confused, scanning the room, until his nephew, a shy boy in the crowd, ran up whispering, "That's the firefighter's daughter." Mr. Hall froze. Life has strange ways of connecting hearts. Sometimes, the person you wrong carries a legacy of the one who saved you. Tracy stopped in her tracks when she saw her daughter on stage, holding that jacket like a shield. The microphone squeaked as Grace continued, her voice steadier now. "My dad didn't make it home that day, but Mom says he wasn't sad. He died doing what he loved, helping people. So when you see me wearing this, please don't laugh. I'm not trying to stand out. I'm trying to remember who I came from." Tears shimmered down Tracy's face. Mr. Hall pressed a hand to his mouth, remembering the day his own nephew had been rescued, the firefighter who never returned. Truth hit the room like a sunrise, slow, blinding, impossible to ignore. Ms. Winters placed a hand over her heart. "Grace, we're so sorry." And just like that, every child who had once laughed fell silent, eyes glistening. Grace blinked through tears. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. Then the applause began, not loud and wild, but genuine, like the kind that carries warmth. Tracy walked to the stage, wrapped her daughter in a trembling hug. The firefighter jacket pressed between them like a sacred memory. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't running into a burning building. It's standing in front of people who misunderstood you and choosing to stay kind. You could almost feel the weight of shame melting into gratitude. It wasn't about costumes anymore. It was about courage, the kind that can't be bought, can't be faked, can't be taken away. Grace looked up at her mother. Tracy nodded, whispering, "He'd be proud." Grace smiled through tears. "I think he is." Mr. Hall stepped forward, voice low. "Your father saved my nephew's life. I never realized." He turned to Tracy, regret in his eyes. "And I treated you unfairly. I'm sorry. You both deserve better." Tracy, caught off guard, nodded quietly. Ms. Winters dabbed her eyes and faced the students. "Let's take a moment to thank Grace and her father for reminding us what real heroes look like." Applause filled the gym again, louder, freer this time. The kind that heals. In that instant, everything changed. Grace was no longer the girl with the old jacket. She was a girl with a hero's heart. Students surrounded her afterward, one offering a cupcake, another asking about her dad. Jules hesitated before walking over. "Grace, I'm sorry. Your dad sounds amazing." Grace smiled, forgiving easily, because holding grudges had never been in her nature. He was, but you know what? He'd like you too. And somehow, that simple sentence broke every wall left between them. When the clapping finally faded, something beautiful happened. Silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty but sacred. The kind that comes when hearts finally understand what words alone could never explain. Grace stood frozen on the stage, jacket hanging from her shoulders like a medal of honor. Her mother's arms still wrapped around her. All around them, faces had changed. No more smirks. No whispers. Just stillness and shame giving way to admiration. Then, from the middle of the crowd, Ms. Winters stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "Grace, that school fire you spoke about. I remember it." She looked down, clutching her chest. "I was teaching next door that day. One of my students was trapped inside. He got out because of a firefighter who refused to stop." Grace blinked, unsure what to say. Ms. Winters swallowed hard, her voice cracking. "That firefighter was your father. I never knew. I never even got to thank him." The room seemed to shrink. Even the lights felt gentler. Ms. Winters, the teacher who had once looked away while Grace was mocked, now stood trembling, tears blurring her vision. She took Grace's small hands into hers. You don't need to change a thing about yourself, Grace. You've already reminded all of us what real courage looks like. Grace smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. And in that single moment, something healed inside her, the quiet wound that years of laughter had left behind. Mr. Hall had come to the festival out of obligation. He didn't know about the speech, didn't know about the story that had just cracked open 100 hearts. All he knew was that the woman he fired was standing on a stage, holding her daughter close while a crowd wiped their tears. He frowned, confused, until he noticed the old firefighter jacket. And then his nephew tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle James," the boy whispered. "That's the man who saved me in the fire. Remember? Mom told me." Mr. Hall froze. His clipboard slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. It's strange how memory works. One moment you're certain of your world, your judgments, your reasons, and the next it unravels, reminding you that you've been standing on someone else's sacrifice all along. Mr. Hall's breath caught in his chest. He took a shaky step forward. "Grace," he said softly, "your father, he saved my nephew's life." Gasps rippled again through the gym. Grace looked up, eyes wide. Tracy turned, stunned. "You knew him?" she asked. Mr. Hall nodded slowly. "I didn't realize until now. When that fire happened, my sister's little boy was trapped inside the same building. He only made it out because of a firefighter who carried him through the flames. I never even learned his name until today." He looked between Tracy and Grace, guilt heavy in his voice. "And all this time, I treated you like you were just another late employee. I was wrong. Your husband was a hero, and you..." His eyes met Tracy's. "You're raising one, too. Sometimes the world doesn't recognize your worth until it's reminded what you came from. And sometimes the apology you never expected becomes the one that frees you." Mr. Hall reached for Tracy's hand. "I can't fix the past," he said, "but I can make it right. Come back to the company. Not as an assistant, as a supervisor. You deserve better." Tracy's lips parted, trembling. She looked like someone who had been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I didn't need you to fix it. I just needed you to see us." And there was again the ripple effect of courage. Because when one person chooses truth over fear, it gives everyone else permission to change. Jules looked down, fidgeting with her sparkly costume. "Grace, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought..." She stopped, swallowing back tears. "I was wrong to laugh at you." Grace tilted her head gently. "It's okay. You know now." Then she smiled, soft, genuine. "My dad always said real heroes forgive fast." The words hit like sunlight after storm. Jules nodded, tears spilling freely. The other students murmured apologies too, each one awkward, quiet, but real. The gym that had once echoed with laughter and judgment was now filled with something else. Respect. No one saw Grace as a girl in the old jacket anymore. They saw her for who she really was. The living proof that love, sacrifice, and courage never die. Ms. Winters wiped her eyes and turned to the audience. "I think," she said softly, "today we all learned what real Halloween spirit means. It's not about costumes. It's about character." Applause followed again, but not the kind that celebrates performance. This one celebrated truth, the kind that makes your throat tight and your chest feel warm. For Tracy, that applause meant more than any paycheck, any promotion, any apology, because it wasn't just Grace who had been misunderstood. She had been fighting battles no one saw, working extra hours, sleeping in cars, smiling through exhaustion, just to keep her daughter's world intact. And now, finally, that strength was seen. Tracy kissed Grace's forehead. "Your dad will be proud of you." Grace smiled, whispering, "Of us, Mom, both of us." For the first time, it felt like he was there again, not just a memory, but in the hearts he'd touched without even knowing. The people he'd saved were now the people helping his family stand tall. Mr. Hall looked around the gym, then raised his voice so everyone could hear. "I think we should give one more round of applause to Captain Daniel Miller, the firefighter who showed us what true bravery means." The crowd erupted. Teachers, parents, students, clapping through tears. Grace stood on that stage, jacket pressed to her heart, her mom beside her, and for once she didn't feel invisible. She felt whole. As the last of the decorations were taken down, Ms. Winters turned to Tracy. "I want to do something special," she said. "Next week, during assembly, I'd like to dedicate a wall in memory of your husband. His story deserves to be told." Tracy's hand flew to her mouth. Grace's eyes widened. "You mean like a hero wall?" Ms. Winters smiled. "Exactly. So every student who walks these halls knows what real heroes look like. It wasn't just a wall. It became a legacy. A single jacket had started a chain reaction, turning shame into pride, laughter into love, and ignorance into empathy. And maybe that's what real courage does. It doesn't just save lives. It changes hearts. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight. There were still bills, still long days, still quiet worries. But something inside them had shifted. Hope had moved back in. Tracy's phone buzzed, an email from Mr. Hall's office. Her promotion letter was official. A raise, health benefits, a steady future. She turned to Grace with tears in her eyes. "We're going to be okay." Grace smiled, holding up the firefighter jacket. "I told you, Mom. Dad's still looking out for us." When the curtain dropped, the crowd gasped. Grace stood front row, her small hands clutching her mother's. The old jacket had been cleaned, framed, and placed beside her father's name. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It was like touching history and healing all at once. Ms. Winters stepped to the mic. "Every hero leaves something behind. For some, it's medals. For others, it's courage passed on through family." Grace reminded us that heroism doesn't end with one act. It lives on through love. And there, in the middle of that school gym, surrounded by faces that once judged her, Grace realized something beautiful. She didn't need to prove her father's legacy anymore. She was living it. Her father's story had finally come full circle. His courage had saved strangers once. Now his memory had saved hearts, including the ones that once hurt her. Sometimes life breaks you down, only to rebuild you stronger. Sometimes the people who laugh at you today will be the ones clapping for you tomorrow. And sometimes the love you think you've lost was never gone at all. It was just waiting to be seen. By the end of the day, Grace's jacket didn't look out of place anymore. It looked right where it belonged, at the center of the room, surrounded by kindness and respect. Later, as everyone packed up, Ms. Winters approached Tracy quietly. "I owe you both an apology," she said. "I should have defended her earlier. She reminds me that strength isn't always loud." Tracy smiled tiredly. "She gets that from her dad." They shared a soft laugh. Sometimes healing doesn't come with grand gestures. It comes with understanding. Evening light filters through gym windows. Decorations half taken down. Grace stands by the stage, touching the old firefighter helmet that had been part of the display. The crowd had left, but Grace stayed a little longer, watching the last glow of sunset paint the jacket gold. She didn't need applause or trophies. She just needed this moment. The silence after truth, when pain turns into peace. A gentle breeze swept through the open door, rustling the sleeve of her father's jacket. Grace smiled. It felt like he was there saying, "You did good, kid." They drove home in quiet joy, not the loud kind that fades, but the steady kind that builds a new chapter. Tracy reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I think today changed a lot of hearts," she said. Grace looked out the window, city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe that's what heroes do, Mom. They don't just save lives, they change them." Tracy smiled, tears shining. "You sound just like him." And maybe she was right. Heroes don't always leave behind medals or monuments. Sometimes they leave behind children brave enough to remind the world what love looks like. That night, as the moon rose over their little apartment, Grace hung her father's jacket by the window. It swayed softly in the light breeze, silent, proud, eternal. Sometimes the people we overlook carry the greatest stories. Sometimes the ones we laugh at are carrying legacies of courage we could never imagine. So before you judge someone's appearance, ask yourself, what pain, what memory, What love might they be holding on to? Because heroes don't always live in fire stations. Sometimes they sit quietly in classrooms, wearing an old jacket that the world finally learns to see. As they reached their front door, Grace looked up at the stars. "Mom," she said, "do you think Dad saw today?" Tracy smiled softly. "I think he's been watching the whole time." Grace nodded, looking up at the brightest star. "Then I hope he knows his jacket did its job." Because sometimes the smallest flame can light the darkest places. And sometimes a little girl in an old jacket can remind the whole world what it means to be brave. Morning crept in quietly, the kind that doesn't promise anything. No miracles, no sudden change, just another chance to keep going. But sometimes that's all a hero needs. Tracy sat on the edge of her bed, eyes fixed on the firefighter jacket hanging by the door. Grace had insisted on keeping it there, right where the morning sun could touch it first. To Tracy, it wasn't just fabric. It was memory, it was unfinished strength. Outside, the neighborhood stirred awake. Kids rushed to the bus. Neighbors watered plants they barely kept alive. Life went on, ordinary and unbothered. But inside that small apartment, something was about to shift. Tracy froze. The landlord's knock used to sound like thunder. But this time, Amanda's voice was softer. "Tracy, you might want to come downstairs. Someone's here to see you." Tracy hesitated. Her mind raced. Maybe another bill collector, maybe more bad news. But when she stepped outside, what she saw stopped her cold. Mr. Hall stood by his car. The same man who fired her weeks ago. Only this time his tie was loosened, his expression uncertain, almost human. Life has a strange way of circling back. Sometimes, to finish what guilt leaves undone. "Tracy, I owe you an apology." He spoke with a humility she'd never heard before. He told her he'd gone to the school festival, how he'd seen Grace's speech, how he learned that the firefighter who died saving lives years ago was her husband. And one of those lives was Mr. Hall's own nephew. In an instant, every judgment, every harsh word he'd thrown at her came crashing down under the weight of truth. Mr. Hall's voice cracked as he said, "If not for your husband, my family would have been mourning me all these years. And yet, I treated you like you were disposable." Tracy's eyes glistened, words failing her. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's in the way tears fall, slow and silent, washing years of pain away. Then, unexpectedly, he handed her an envelope, a reinstatement letter. "The company needs people like you," he said. "People who don't give up." For the first time in months, Tracy felt the ground beneath her feet again. Not the shaky kind made of fear and overdue rent, but solid ground built on dignity. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was restoration, the kind that only truth can bring. Later that day, Tracy walks into her workplace. Her co-workers pause, surprised but welcoming. Mr. Hall stands beside her, introducing her as the new shift supervisor. The whispers that once carried her failures now carried her story. The same office where she was humiliated became the place she rose again. Tracy's desk looked the same chair, same flickering monitor, but the air felt different. Even Mr. Hall's tone softened. He asked about Grace, about school, about life. Things he'd never cared to ask before, because understanding changes everything. Grace sat at her desk, quietly coloring. The same classmates who once mocked her now hovered near her desk, awkward but kind. Jules, the popular girl, approached, eyes downcast. Jules quietly said, "Grace, I'm sorry for everything." Grace looked up, puzzled, then smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't gloat, only forgives. Children mirror the world around them. When adults change, they follow. And sometimes, a single act of courage can rewrite how a whole community sees kindness. It was picture day again. But this time, the air carried no laughter at anyone's expense. It carried pride, warmth, unity. Grace stood in the center, her father's jacket fitting a little better now. Sleeves rolled, buttons polished, the name patch R. Collins gleaming under the light. Around her stood classmates in every kind of costume. Princesses, astronauts, cowboys, but no one laughed anymore. They smiled with her, not at her. Some jackets hold more than cloth and stitches. They hold legacies. They hold love that refuses to fade. Tracy and Grace return home. Amanda, the landlord, waits outside their door holding a folder. Tracy braces, expecting another notice. But Amanda's eyes are kind. Amanda said, "You don't owe me rent this month." Or next, "Consider it a thank you to a family that's done more for this community than most people ever knew." For once, the weight Tracy carried was lifted by the hands of others. And just like that, the woman who thought the world had forgotten her discovered that kindness travels in circles. It always finds its way home. That night, they celebrated not with cake or money, but with peace. The kind that fills a room so completely you forget what emptiness ever felt like. It wasn't luxury. It was love, raw, imperfect, real, because redemption doesn't come dressed in riches. It comes when you finally see yourself the way hope always did. Grace said, "See, Mom, I told you heroes never give up." And just like that, the daughter reminded the mother of what she'd forgotten. That being a hero isn't about saving everyone. It's about not giving up on yourself. Weeks passed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became peaceful. And sometimes that's better. Grace woke early, humming to herself as she set 2 mugs of cocoa on the table. One for her, one for Dad. It was a ritual now. She talked to his photo like he never left. Told him about school, about how Mom smiled more these days. And in that little ritual, the fire of memory stayed alive. Tracy didn't interrupt. She just listened, letting the sound of her daughter's voice fill the spaces that grief once haunted. Healing, she realized, isn't forgetting. It's learning to remember without pain. Later that day, the school holds a small assembly. A new plaque is unveiled in honor of firefighter Ryan Collins, who gave his life so others could live. Grace stands beside her mom, eyes glistening as the curtain drops and applause echoes through the hall. That name, etched in brass, was more than tribute. It was a bridge between the past and everything he'd left behind, between the sacrifice and the lives it changed. Every face in that room carried a story touched by one man's courage and one family's strength. For years, they'd all lived separate lives, unaware of how one heartbeat connected them. But now, the truth bound them together. She didn't tremble this time. She wasn't the shy girl hiding behind memories. She was a storyteller now, the keeper of legacy. Grace said, "My dad didn't just save people from a fire. He taught me what it means to never give up, even when life burns around you. And my mom, she's my hero too. She never stopped fighting, even when everything was falling apart." In that moment, 2 generations of courage stood side by side, the father who ran into fire and the daughter who carried his flame. At home, Grace places a firefighter helmet on the mantle, beside a framed photo of her father and the new class photo where she stands proudly in the center. Some stories end in ashes. Theirs ended in light. Because real heroes don't fade away. They live on in the love they left behind. Grace touches the helmet, whispers softly, "I love you, Dad." And though no one answered, the silence felt full, like somewhere her father smiled. Change rippled outward, quiet but unstoppable. The people who once judged now served. The ones who once looked down now lifted others up. Because when grace meets truth, transformation follows. Later that night, Tracy sits by the window, coffee in hand, city lights twinkling outside. She thought about the road behind her, the fear, the nights in the car, the laughter through tears, and realized something profound. Every fall, every mistake, every moment she thought she'd lost everything had led her right here, to peace. She whispered, "We made it, Ryan." And in that single frame, mother, daughter, memory, hope, the story of family was complete. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear old jackets that tell stories the world forgot to listen to. Sometimes they raise daughters who teach the world how to love again. And sometimes they live quietly in the hearts that remember them. So before you judge someone by what they wear, what they drive, or where they live, ask yourself what story they might be carrying. Because every scar, every wrinkle, every faded jacket, might just be the mark of a hero you never knew existed. Never judge others by appearances. Everyone's fighting a battle you can't see. No act of kindness is ever wasted, and no heart that chooses love is ever truly forgotten. If this story touched your heart, share it, because somewhere out there, another Grace is waiting to hear that heroes still exist.